Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video I'll be reviewing the monograph supplement, The Vermin, designed by R.G. Wood for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/Rogue Watson. Shoutouts to my platinum patrons, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Manuel, Basil, Wizard Princess, Christopher, Dave, By Inspection, and Star Loverly. And gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy Numa, Marcos Did Vicente, Gilberto, Shani, K2B, Adam, Dead Lizard, Lion Sam, Arash, Lumpy Spuds, Drone, Fatboy619, Sklenia, Nick, and Farty McButterpants. Thank you all very much for your support. I previously reviewed another monograph by this designer called The Enchanted. Now, a monograph, which is something I had to look up when I did the previous review, is just a generally short, small product, supplement, whatever, on a single topic. In this case, the topic is rat folk. And the designer uses a very specific style that makes it look like it's like a magazine article in a black and white magazine. So it's something that's not immediately recognizable for a lot of DM's Guild products because they're not really done in this style, but it's one that I actually really dig. I think it looks really, really nice. And there's a difference between a product that is absent of color, and it looks like that, and one that is specifically designed for a monochrome style, only black and white, using all this cool shading techniques and everything. And that's what this is. And it's not literally just black and white. It actually does, have modern, looking font, and it has the nice red subheadings. Like it kind of flirts with both ways, where it looks like it's kind of an old school magazine article, but it actually does look like a modern piece. But then the artwork still has really, really attractive, cool black and white art. So I really like the design of this, despite it being very, very short. And one of my chief complaints from the last product, which was the Enchanted that I reviewed from this designer, was that it was super short, which is kind of the point. Like, they're just supposed to be like kind of mini magazine article style products that cover a specific area. And this one improves on two things. First of all, the specific topic is one that makes sense for it to be pretty short. It's just a single subset of a kind of enemy, in this case, rat folk. Perfect. It's just zero in on that one little thing, give me some stat blocks, fine. And it's also actually a lot longer than the previous supplement because it includes an entire dungeon. We'll call it a layer, I guess. Or sure, it's a dungeon. I mean, it's got the Dice and Logos map. It's 10 rooms long, and it uses the rat folk, which is awesome. So, in my opinion, this gives you a complete product, despite it being 10 pages long of rat folk. So I think it's very well done. I would give it a thumbs up, and we can go over some of the rat folk stuff. First of all, I didn't even realize I had to go back into the monster manual because I'm like, wait, are rat folk not already a thing? Turns out they are not a thing. Were-rats are a thing. In fact, there's a couple were versions of various bestial creatures. And typically, I guess what I was remembering, if I was fighting, rat people in Neverwinter Nights or something, or anywhere else, they're actually were-rats. They're not rat folk, at least in the Forgotten Realms. So this adds rat folk as a stat block. Very, very, very low level CR 1/8, which I believe is as low as you can possibly get. Designed to be obviously in mass. Now, you're not going to find usually a single rat folk, or if you see one, there's more, kind of a deal. And the cool thing about the Vermin is it really embodies, these rat folk embody all like the worst, most stereotypical traits of rats, in that if you see one, there's more. They're always hidden. They know how to escape. They are swarming. And they're disease-ridden. So all like the worst qualities that we associate with rats and call them vermin is embodied here in the rat folk. There are 4 stat blocks provided for the rat folk. First of all, you get a little bit of introduction to, rat folk, which again, if you could probably imagine, they live in like sewers and warrens and tunnels under the city. They're a good replacement for the usual kind of goblins and kobolds, but specifically in a city setting. So there's a nice little DM notes about where to use them. I kind of wish there was a little bit more of this, actually, just recommendations from, where to use them and kind of how they would, what their hierarchy is like and all that. Although it gets into that a little bit when we get to the Rat King. The rat folk is just pretty basic. The one thing they all have which is interesting, is the Squirm ability, where they can actually occupy a space with one other rat folk. They're listed as small, but usually you can't occupy the same like 5-foot grid space. These ones can, and if they do that, then they can take the dodge action as a bonus action. So actually it's harder to hit them, despite there being multiples in one space, and that's supposed to kind of reflect their, that nasty thing that rats do where they kind of crawl over each other. So that's pretty cool, and it also, interestingly enough, makes fighting them in tight tunnels tactically challenging for players and allows you to use the rats to their advantage. On the other hand, trying to actually mechanically do that on a map could be very tricky because, maps are made in a 5-foot grid, and it's really not supportive to put more than one like literal token or minifigure, whatever you're using, on the same square. So that gets a little bit tricky, although I kind of dig the ability. It's just going to be hard to do that visually. The rat folk Skulk is just a rat folk who's a rogue and gets the sneak attack bonus, which seems very appropriate. The Rack has the disease ability. In this case, it's a vomit. It's like a poison vomit, which is incredibly gross and not how I think diseased rats necessarily operate, but sure, why not? We'll go gross with it. And speaking of gross, we've got the Rat King, which I thought, okay, it's just maybe a leader of rats who has the ability to command them, and yes, it kind of does, but it's actually way more gross than that. It's a bunch of rats. Their tails have fused together. I think their legs have disappeared, is what it mentions, and they just have it's just a squirming. It's just basically just a single squirming pile of rats that represents like their hive mind. It's super gross in a good way. And it's got some really cool built-in abilities. It can call all the rats to itself, or at least as kind of a general feature that it can do. It basically has the Bless ability within, as long as there's another rat folk within 30 feet. They all get a D4 to their attack roll or saving throw. And it has a Mind Blast, which is just a attack. And then the reaction, it essentially is a built-in Sanctuary. If it sees another rat folk being attacked, so it sees itself being attacked, I believe. It can choose another rat folk to take that attack, which is an awesome ability for bosses to have, because obviously you want your your players are going to want to focus on your boss, and that can be a really interesting tactical thing for a DM to, a wrinkle to put in there is if all your players are focusing and the at least once per round it's a reaction, but still you can like dictate that throws a rat in front of it basically, and you end up attacking the rat and kind of wasting that action. So I really like that because one of the, huge advantages and abilities of the rat folk is just having a lot of rats, so that's a cool way of using it. Also, I like seeing low-level enemies that have legendary actions. Do more of that. That is really cool. That's something I don't usually see because we associate legendary actions with huge, high-level monsters, and I don't necessarily think that needs to be the case. I think every tier and every era, we want to call it that, of play could involve boss fights as long as they're tuned to that. They can still be hard for that level of player. And I think all boss fights should have legendary actions because that is how you make them bosses. Like, yeah, you can make all their stats good, but you're still at the mercy of the dice. You need to be able to fix the action economy, and that's something that D&D does with the legendary action. So I love that this relatively lowly Rat King, CR1, the Rat Folk was CR1 8th, so even a CR1 Rat King is supposedly more powerful, gets legendary actions where they can use, just their attacks as, in between rounds, which is cool. However, I will raise an eyebrow at the fact that this thing has 90 hit points and it's still only challenge rating 1, and its basic attack, it's not great at attacking. It should do its Mind Blast as much as possible. Its basic attack's only a +2, but it could deal 4d6 piercing damage. It does have that Swarm ability where if you deal more than half damage, it goes down because it's this weird Gestalt version. But it's got a Mind Blast ability where it can just do a ranged attack with an intelligence, it says check, it should probably be saving throw, to do 4d6 psychic damage or half. Again, if the Rat King is fewer than half its hit points. It seems really damn powerful for being a CR1. I looked at the Ogre stats to kind of remind myself. The Ogre, and granted, this thing has AC 6, which means that literally everybody's going to hit it unless you crit fail, has about half the hit points and deals about the same amount of damage, minus the Mind Blast feature, and it's CR2. So I think this thing probably, the challenge rating thing kind of goes out the door at some point anyway. It just gets really nuts, but I think at low levels is probably where CR is tuned the best, and this one feels like it needs to be a CR2, or the hit points need to go down, I think. Maybe with that super low of an AC, it doesn't matter that much. But it just doesn't feel like there's much difference between an AC 6 and AC like 10 or 11. Like honestly, you're like most level 1 PCs have around a to hit of like 4 or 5, so it's not really gonna make a huge amount of difference there. But I really like its abilities. I love the legendary actions. I think that's a really cool feature for a relatively low level boss monster to have, and I would love to see more low level bosses with legendary actions and reactions and just cool build. I mean, this is absolutely. I want to see the designer build more low level bosses because that just seems like a really fun creature to have. And we get a dungeon included in here, which is awesome because, granted, I liked the content here. You know, the rat folk thing is good. There's multiple stat blocks, but at the end of the day, it's like 4 pages long. So it's tough to, it's always tough to warrant a purchase on something that's just so dang short. Even though I'm not saying everything has to be this huge, 100-page supplement or whatever else, but it is very short. But this one, I think, really makes up for it with the dungeon. The Rat Folk Nest is a well-designed dungeon. You can see it's got the Dyson Logos map, which I am personally not a fan of. I'm sorry. I know a lot of people like that style. I know that those maps are designed to be used. They can be licensed, and it's an easy one to kind of fill out and throw in there, and it's got the rooms. It's, as somebody who plays in a virtual tabletop, it just doesn't work for me. It doesn't look good. I want maps to be able to play on, and not just from a design standpoint. Yes, this is better than no map at all, but and the interesting thing is, out of all the times I've seen a Dyson Logos map used, here in a purely like black and white art style, which I love the art and the design of it and the layout, everything, it does fit pretty well. Just from a flipping through the pages and seeing that map along with other maps, it doesn't stand out as badly as other, full color products that use this kind of map. So I will say that. But I still don't personally like this map style, and I would not be able to use it. So, sorry. However, the dungeon design is very well done. It's a classic, like underneath, tunnels, warrens, whatever. It's a rat folk lair, obviously. It starts off with a 50-foot shaft. You have to climb down in there, and it's all just gross. There's fetid water. There's one area where the rats don't go in, which I always like when a dungeon, has those kind of separate rooms that don't necessarily have anything to do with the theme, but on the other hand, you can tell that the enemies that live there don't even go in there. In this case, it's like an animated armor that guards this old armory. And there's just rats everywhere, basically. I mean, there's some cool things. There's like a trap that the rat folk set up at the entrance, a kind of a door with nails on it that swings down. There's a really cool area in Area 7. It's got the diseased rat and some other rats, and there's like a corpse hanging upside down that's all diseased and kind of magically infused with disease, and if anybody gets close, I believe it can deal some damage with a con save. Otherwise, there's rats hanging out. There's a little library area because the rat folk they're not just like feral. I mean, they're sentient critters, but they work in like secrets and behind the scenes stuff and all that. You can actually roll for different secret notes that you find in the library area. I love the way that it's very open too. It's got all this sprawling, it's built like a tunnel network, and you could conceivably make it to the boss right off the bat if you go south from Area 2, which I don't believe there's no bad guys in Area 2. There's one trap leading in the entrance. You could go south to Area 2. Depending on if the DM wants to trigger the rats in the tunnels in 5, you could skip them and conceivably make it to the boss right here in Area 9. And that is the Rat King, which is my awesome boss that I love. However, it does mention the fact that if you haven't fought anybody, then the Rat King will absolutely summon all the rats in the dungeon to come at you. So it's an interesting bit where if the party kind of realizes how rats work, or depending on how open you want to be without a DM, maybe they even make it to the boss and say, okay, we're going to actually hightail it back and maybe clear out some of this dungeon. But it looks, from a dungeon design standpoint, it works very, very well. I like that there's a good amount of rats everywhere. They're still spaced out. The tunnels look fun. There's, little bits to explore. There's enough traps in there. It's not, a huge mega dungeon with like a lot of social opportunities or anything like that, but I don't necessarily need that either. And this is designed to be just a single layer without any kind of adventure, connected to it either. You could just drop this in wherever you want. So for all that, I think it checks all those boxes for me. I think it does very well. It does what it sets out to do. It looks good, and it's pretty well designed, minus the fact that, of course, I'm not a big fan of that map design. And that is it for this entire supplement. So let's go over my pros and cons for the Vermin. Pros: 4 rat block stat blocks. Rat block. rat folk stat blocks, including the awesome Rat King. I really, really, really love this creature. I think it is visually cool and mechanically interesting as a boss. I absolutely love all of its abilities. I would be really excited to run this kind of creature and then build a, and frankly, I could use that dungeon as well. I think it works pretty well in terms of a little rat dungeon and just a little side quest of clearing out the rats beneath our city. Pros, the attractive design with fantastic original monochrome artwork. This supplement looks really good. You don't need color necessarily to make a good looking supplement. I think this proves that completely. It uses the red very, very well, which I'm glad. It's not literally just black and white, but the sidebars still look good. The font is large and easy to read. Like it's very well put together. And pros, really the entire dungeon design is very well done. I enjoyed having it, first of all, and it's also very well done. It's got, enough of what I want. It's missing socialization, but I'll give it a pass because it's tiny and it just got a bunch of rats in it. That's fine. My only con is, unfortunately, the map style. I'm basically always going to do this to any supplement that uses it. I'm sorry. My apologies go out to fans of this map style, but it's just not one that I like. It looks better here than it does in most places. I will say that because of the monochrome art throughout. But it's not one that I can use as a VTT, so it would unfortunately make me redesign this entire actual physical map, although I may still actually use the design of the map because it is a pretty good, well-designed map. Alright, final verdict. With multiple stat blocks and a well-designed layer, the Vermin packs a lot of helpful content into a tiny but attractive package. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson, and you can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.